Welcome back. You're still tuned in to News and Views with myself, Salailo Makwidiyar. The time is 10 minutes past 8, and we're going to be kickstarting the show with a very, very important topic. South Africa may finally be clawing its way out of the Financial Action Task Force, the FATF grey list, and the symbolic timing couldn't be more powerful. After years of state capture rot and criminal justice collapse, some analysts are saying October could mark a turning point for the country's economic credibility. According to organizations like Business Leadership South Africa, we have seemingly ticked all of the Financial Action Task Force boxes, overhauled anti-money laundering structures, beefed up financial intelligence, and rebuilt decimated prosecutorial capacity. But is this enough to regain the trust of global markets and shield ourselves from new threats like those looming U.S. tariffs? Well, join us now to break it all down is political economist Dr. Dale McKinley, who's going to help us explore what this new development really means for South Africa, and being on the brink of escaping that grey list, and whether this signals the end of the state capture hangover, or at least the beginning thereof, or maybe just a pause before another storm that South Africans have to endure makes its way. Dr. McKinley, thank you so much for joining us. Always a pleasure having you here on Salam Media. I really appreciate you giving us your time. Good morning.
Good morning, Salelo, and good morning to your listeners and viewers. Always a pleasure. Thanks.
Pleasure's all ours. I think we can kickstart the conversation, Doc, with the development that has everyone excited. We've heard the news of South Africa meeting all of their FATF requirements. Could this actually result into an exit of that grey list by October at least? And most importantly, how significant is this moment, both symbolically and also economically?
Yeah. So as you mentioned in the previous the remarks, basically it looks as though, no guarantee, but it looks as though everything is in place for South Africa to be taken off the grey list, as mentioned, by October. They seemingly the last hurdle in this process, which has been going on for the last 2 years, has been about strengthening the institutions, our law enforcement institutions, the regulatory institutions that oversee the enforcement of our laws in relation to money laundering and financial oversight, sector oversight. So, for example, like the National Prosecuting Authority, the Directorate of Public Prosecutions, and also, the Hawks and other financial task force teams, the Financial Intelligence Center as well. So, yeah, it's quite significant in the sense of it hasn't had a huge, massive practical impact so far. I don't think. I mean, look, it has. The grey listing has sort of scared off possibly a few people in relation to some investments and other kinds of things. But I think, generally speaking, there were a lot of countries that were on this grey list. We certainly weren't by far the only one. And many others have begun also seemingly also on our continent, like Nigeria and other countries, to address similar kinds of gaps. So what it does is it sort of calms things particularly for the private sector, because when you are considering coming into our country and when you're considering investing or whatever, these kinds of issues sort of play in the background as to whether or not you're going to be able to engage in your businesses, legally, engage with them without basically having to deal with a lot of possibilities of sanctions and other kinds of barriers and bureaucratic hurdles. So it's significant. It's more symbolically significant, I think, for our pride and our sort of reputation than it is in the more immediate term for the practical side of things.
A lot of analysts, frame, grey listing as a direct legacy of state capture. Would you agree with that? We are now seemingly reaping the consequences of a deliberately weakened criminal justice system.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, there's no doubt that the link is quite direct. But just remember, I mean, we're talking now about it when the time that sort of the so-called state capture period ended was quite a number of years ago. So those legacies have been with us on a number of fronts. I mean, anybody paying attention to the news in the last few months will know that, for example, the National Prosecuting Authority is trying to go back after the Guptas. They still never were extradited. Nobody, the New Lane case, the Free State, some of these state captured cases, which have gone back and forth in the courts. So it still animates our political discourse, absolutely. And in the context of the gray listing, there were, I think, it's certainly the destruction of a lot of the investigative capacity and a lot of the regulatory capacity of those institutions, the law enforcement institutions, the regulatory and oversight institutions, was directly linked to the gray listing, because essentially it would be like saying, okay, we're taking off the guardrails. There's not going to be any more or very little oversight. And we've noticed the consequences of that. Criminal syndicates have been running rampant in our trade and other economy. We're considered to be a fairly porous country when it comes to trafficking, international trafficking on all sorts of fronts. So on our ports and on our other kinds of areas where people are coming through. So yes, the state capture has definitely had its negative impacts. But I think it's to think that we're going to be taken off this gray list, and that means that now we're really, really capturing the legacies of state capture. I think it's early days. This is a positive thing. It's certainly something that should have happened quite some time ago, but it's certainly just one sort of a brick in the wall of breaking down that wall of state capture that has done so much damage to not only our politics, but our economy as well.
What kind of message does a possible exit from this grey list send? I think most importantly to international investors. And is it enough to undo years of reputational damage? As you said, it does, add a bit to the reputation of South Africa, and it's quite symbolic. But is it enough, or there's still more that needs to be done to kind of have South Africa a destination of choice, especially here on the continent where we've always been seen as a gateway to the rest of Africa?
Yeah, so it's not enough. And we should be clear what the two sides of this coin are. The one side is this international side with the taking off of the gray list and basically making it, as we mentioned, making it a bit more easier for those who might consider coming here or wanting to invest or otherwise to not have to worry about at least so much about that kind of negative impacts on what they're going to be doing in our country. But the other side of the coin, which this doesn't touch, is our domestic realities of state capture. The fact that we still have massive amounts of corruption, the fact that we still have massive amounts of mismanagement, of non-functioning state institutions or very badly functioning state institutions, management issues, planning issues. These are not directly connected to the gray listing in this context. And you can have the international side can be taken care of, and they can say, look, you've done all these things, you've ticked those boxes. But if your institutions themselves at a local, municipal, provincial, and either national level are not functioning properly and are still captured by local, criminal syndicates and tenderpreneurs and all sorts of other things at the local level, we're still going to be running into problems. And you can see that this is exactly what has happened in my own city of Johannesburg. The water crisis is an absolute, it's a mess. And it fundamentally revolves around capture. It's state capture of the city council by the same kinds of forces, but it's at a local and municipal level. So we're not going to be able to deal with those legacies fully until we begin to deal with our own internal structural and governance and corruption and management issues at a public sector level, and the relationship between the private sector and the public sector and those corrupt relationships and rooting them out. So once that begins to happen in earnest, or at least that begins to take off, then we could say that we have a parallel process to deal with state capture. Until then, this is a positive development, but it's certainly only one component of it.
Doc, I want us to take a quick break, but when we come back, I want to focus on systemic reform because one of the Financial Action Task Force's final demands was improving prosecutorial capacity. And I want us to touch on this when we come back. And the question there would be, have we genuinely rebuilt institutions like the NPA and policing units, or is it one of those paper compliances that you just have to present? So we'll touch on that a bit after the short break.
This is Salam Media.
Discover the Africa of your dreams and surround yourself with her spectacular beauty. Relax beneath her serene sunsets and explore wildlife at its natural best. It's where the pride of Africa comes together. The Kwantu Private Game Reserve. Get to know the Big Five or cruise on an elephant safari game drive. Interact with lion and tiger cubs and enjoy world-class halal cuisine while we pamper you during your 5-star stay. Indulge in the true African experience. For reservations, call now on 042-203-1400 or visit kwantu.co.za. The Kwantu Private Game Reserve, the place of gathering.
They say breakfast is the most important meal of the day, yet many children go to school hungry because of poverty. Penny Appeal South Africa's Breakfast Club aims to get a warm, hearty meal to underprivileged children so they can spend their day prospering in their schoolwork. Help feed a needy learner for only 5 Rand a day or 150 Rand a month. Or visit our website www.pennyappeal.org.za or call 031 1100 573 to find out how you can donate. Penny Appeal South Africa. Small change, big difference.
You know, it's a wonder how kids get anything done these days. With all the distractions, when do they even get time to study? As a mother, all I can really do is make sure they have all they need to perform at their best. That's why I choose to include Sunfoil, triple refined pure sunflower oil with every meal I make. Naturally cholesterol-free and approved by the Heart and Stroke Foundation as part of a balanced eating plan. So whether I'm cooking, frying or baking, I know every dish will be a wholesome one. Sunfoil, now we're cooking.
Gaza needs your support more than ever. Homes have been shattered and families have lost everything. With your support, our teams are delivering clean water tankers, feeding the hungry, and assisting orphans who have no one left. Let us give Gaza whatever help we can. African Muslims Agency, empowering, educating, inspiring.
Valley's Motor Spares. We supply motor spares and accessories for all makes and models of motor cars, LDVs, buckies, trucks, and earth-moving equipment. We deliver on time, every time. Please contact us via WhatsApp on 014-592-0925 or call 014-592-0925 or visit 28 Zenderling Street, Rustenburg. Remember the name, Valley's Motor Spares.
Breaking stereotypes, moving boundaries, joining hands. Salam Media. Humanity sets the agenda.
Welcome back. You're still tuned in to News and Views with myself, Salailo Makwidiri. And we're still having quite a very, very important and insightful conversation with political analyst and economist, Dr. Dale McKinley. And we're talking about South Africa potentially by October being removed from the FATF grey list. If you remember, we were placed on that grey list in February 2023. This was due to strategic deficiencies in the country's anti-money laundering and counter-terrorist financing regime, as identified by the FATF. The FATF placed South Africa under increased monitoring to address some of these deficiencies. And well, it seems South Africa is getting its house in order, at least at a surface level. And we're just unpacking that because of that potential of South Africa being removed from that grey list by October later this year. Doc, thank you so much much for staying with us. Really, really appreciate it. Before we went on that short break, I mentioned that I want us to focus on the systemic reform, because one of the FATF, Financial Action Task Force, final demands was improving prosecutorial capacity. Have we genuinely rebuilt institutions like the NPA and some of our policing units, or is this just a paper compliance question?
Well, I think it's not just paper compliance. There's clearly have to be some kind of practical movement forward, and I think it has been happening. I don't think it's there. It's not certainly where we want to be at. So let's take the NPA as an example. What is clear is that the NPA has brought on a number of new staff members, has tried to deal with others that have become problematic, that might have been involved in some of these activities during their state capture years, or are undermining the efforts from within to actually have successful prosecutions. You heard Shamila Batoy. She's come under a lot of pressure and attack publicly for not having success in the courts, or at least some of the more high-profile cases. But her defense was, one of her responses was, listen, what you don't see is what we've been doing behind the scenes for the last 2 years, is trying to get things better. So I think there certainly have been things happening. Otherwise, we wouldn't be in the situation where they're about to take us off the gray list. But I think where sometimes the gap in our analysis of this is that we look at the prosecutorial authorities, but we don't look at the necessary investigating authorities. A prosecutorial case is only as good as the investigation itself. If you have a prosecutor goes to court with a weak case, then they're going to become problematic. And I think that's what we saw in some of the cases where the NPA, in this case, at least as the prosecutorial authority, lost the case. So it's the Hawks, it's the Special Investigating Unit, it's the DIP within the SAPS, it's the Defense Intelligence, it's the Financial Task Force. There's a range of different investigatory authorities that are supposed to be part of this team. So it's not just the NPA, and I think the NPA still has a way to go, but it needs the support, and other things need to happen in other institutions for the NPA to be able to go to the court very confidently, I think, and be able to present the kinds of cases that would result in convictions. Because that's the other side of the demand, by the way, which we need to remind ourselves. It's not just about policies and legislations and capacities. It's about whether you're having the impact. So, and that problem has always been a challenge for us in South Africa. We have a lot of laws. We have a lot of good things on paper, as you mentioned. But in terms of the actual enforcement, even if we win a case, even if someone is convicted, do they actually pay the price fully? And is that a deterrent for future action?
No, definitely. I want to focus on the impact on the ground. Since 2023, when South Africa was placed on that grey list, what kind of impact has that had, especially on, small businesses in the country? And also, if by October, we are removed from the grey listing, which, from what I've gathered from a lot of small business owners, is that it made basic international transactions a nightmare. Local businesses were really, really struggling. Would there be any kind of relief on that front, if that could be felt by South Africans, by small business owners on the ground by October, if hopefully we are indeed removed from the grey list?
Sure. It certainly, I think, would have a positive impact. As you mentioned, quite a lot of the small and medium scale enterprises rely on international financial transactions going back and forth in order to keep their businesses afloat and in order to be able to access credit or other kinds of things like this. And in many cases, just remember that this gray listing stems from what was happening in many cases through banks, through financial institutions. That financial institutions and authorities such as McKinsey and these consultants and other kinds of things during the state capture years were actually facilitating the illegal transfers of funds, supposedly sometimes to terrorist organizations, but also for criminal syndicates, and were not doing the proper necessary oversight. So in some ways, it's the banks themselves and the oversight of the banks and the strengthening of that is going to be fundamental in order to allow small scale and medium business to be able to go to a financial institution and not be then punished because the financial institution is sort of blaming them or trying to say, well, because we don't have our act together, we're not going to give you money or we're not going to transact with you because we're afraid we might get punished or afraid that you might be on some list. With all of those other things in place, that then hopefully opens up the door to make it much easier bureaucratically, not being able to have to wait for such a long time in order to be able to not only engage in these transactions, but to do so confidently that it's within the law as well.
All right. I think we're going to leave on that note. Dr. McKinley, thank you so much for your insights this morning. Always a pleasure chatting to you. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay.
There you go. There was Dr. McKinley. He's an economist and also political analyst. And yeah, it seems the road of the grey list may finally be in sight for South Africa. But as you heard from Dr. McKinley, the real work of rebuilding trust and justice needs to continue. And not just on a surface level, on the ground, strengthening institutions like the NPA, like the Hawks and our various policing units. And yeah, it'll be interesting times. But I think a very, very good news that I think a lot of South Africans will definitely appreciate. Now, while South Africa navigates economic recovery just across the continent, here in Kenya, there seems to be fires that are burning. You know, what began as youth-led protests against a controversial financial bill has turned into a national crisis with at least 8 lives lost in the last 24 hours. So yeah, up next, we speak to Josiah Morukchi. He's a Kenyan student living here in South Africa, about the chaos that's unfolding in his home country. He was part of those protests, I think it was sometime last year, where Kenyans world over in Kenya and in the diaspora were essentially putting their government to task and, asking very, very difficult questions about their President William Ruto and the government and how they've been running the country and how the effects of some of the legislations that they're putting in place is essentially strangling the youth and pushing most of them, like Josiah, out of the country to places like South Africa and parts of Europe to seek greener pastures. So yeah, we head out to Kenya after the short break.